Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our sandals and stepping into the steamy marble echo chamber of a Roman public bathhouse. The air smells faintly of warm oil, old stone, and ambition. Voices murmur around you, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings, mingling with the splashes of water and the sharp hiss of steam. A burly man slaps another on the back, too hard, and someone else laughs from behind a column. Welcome to the Thermae, where every sweaty back tells a story, and every drip from the ceiling has heard a secret. You're not just here to rinse off. No, this is Rome. You're here to be seen, to network, to gossip, to sweat out last night's questionable fish stew, and maybe to secure a business deal or flirt with someone far above your pay grade. You'll elbow your way through senators, bakers, gladiators on their day off, and men who claim they almost made consul. And you probably won't survive this, not because of a lion, but because you'll slip on the wet mosaic floor and fall directly into a philosophical debate about the soul with a half-naked man holding a sponge on a stick. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe fluff your pillows, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You enter the apoditarium, the changing room. Benches line the walls, slaves shuffle past, guarding togas with the devotion of watchdogs. You pick your corner, strip down, and stash your belongings in a cubby. There's always a risk of theft, so you keep one eye on your sandals. That's not a joke. Graffiti from Pompeii literally warns bathers to beware of sneaky thieves. Apparently, even in the heart of an empire, someone still wants to steal your damp towel. Next, you pass into the frigidarium, the cold plunge room, to shock your system, but that comes later. First, you aim for the caldarium, the hot steam chamber where the real action happens. Not physical, mind you, but social, because here in the heat, under dripping ceilings and next to fountains shaped like lion heads, Romans conduct an entirely different kind of business. You see, bathing in Rome was a public affair, a daily routine for millions, especially during the empire's peak. But don't mistake it for modern self-care. The bathhouse was where reputations were made or destroyed, where you could casually mention your latest land acquisition while rubbing your thigh with olive oil. Power moved through steam, and silence often meant you didn't matter. You shuffle in, the heat hits like a wall, your skin prickles. Someone hands you a strigil, a curved bronze scraper, used to remove oil and dirt from the skin, not soap. Romans didn't believe in it. They coated themselves in scented oil, then scraped it off, grime and all. It sounds bizarre, but it was the standard. A form of exfoliation so aggressive, it could probably take off your worries too. There are 3 men huddled on a bench nearby. One's a local magistrate. The second is a merchant whose tunic screams new money. The third is pretending not to listen, but is absolutely taking mental notes. They're murmuring about grain shipments, about whether that one senator's latest speech was actually a veiled insult, about whether the fish sauce supplier is watering it down again. Historians still argue whether real political decisions were formally made in these settings, but no one denies the influence exchanged between buckets of steam. And then, there's you, just trying to sit down without getting third-degree burns from the marble. The etiquette is unspoken but deeply ingrained. Don't splash, don't sprawl. Don't start a philosophical rant unless you've read at least 3 Stoics and can quote Cicero without blinking. Nearby, a group of older men sigh in unison. A younger man drops his strigil with a loud clang. A woman's voice rings out faintly from a separate section. Yes, some baths had gendered spaces or alternating hours, but not always. It depended on the decade, the emperor, and the mood of local officials. Rome was nothing if not inconsistent. The heat intensifies. Someone passes by with a bucket of herbs, tossing it onto the stone to release a fragrant cloud. Lavender, maybe, or oregano. You breathe in. It does nothing to mask the scent of sweaty ambition. One man in the corner begins lecturing about Galen, the famed physician. He insists bathing in the wrong order messes with your humours. Another disagrees, loudly, citing Pliny the Elder instead. The debate grows heated even by caldarium standards. Someone coughs dramatically. You decide to move on. As you exit toward the tepidarium, the warm chamber, you catch sight of a familiar face, your patron. His brow is sweaty, his posture regal, his expression unreadable. He nods once. That's good. You must have said something smart last week. Or maybe he's just too hot to bother frowning. Either way, you survive the first stage of the bathhouse gauntlet. Congratulations. Now onto oils, massages, and possibly crocodile fat. Don't worry, we'll get there. You shuffle into the tepidarium, your skin still glowing from the caldarium's brutal embrace. This room is gentler. The air is warm but not stifling. The light filtered through high, narrow windows. You pause to catch your breath on a wide bench of polished stone. Around you, the sounds soften. Less clanging, more sighing. This is the spa part of the Roman bathhouse routine, or at least what passes for it when half the ingredients sound like they came from a cursed recipe scroll. An attendant approaches with a tray of oils. You nod politely, though you're silently hoping he skips the crocodile fat. Yes, actual crocodile fat. The Romans believed it had warming properties, good for muscle stiffness. Historians still argue whether this was based on any true medicinal value or simply because crocodiles looked like they knew how to relax after eating a man whole. Either way, it was expensive and wildly fashionable among the elite. You opt for the rosemary oil. Safer. It smells nice, and it doesn't come from an animal that can outrun you in a shallow pool. The massage begins. Not with a gentle back rub, but with firm pressure from fists that feel like they've kneaded marble. Roman massages were practical, not pampering. You're twisted, pressed, scraped, and occasionally slapped. It's all part of the therapeutic method, they claim. You wonder if someone made a mistake and sent a gladiator trainee instead of a masseur. Another man nearby is getting the full treatment. Oil rubbed into his shoulders, arms stretched like a cat, his back dusted with a mixture of crushed rose petals and what suspiciously looks like powdered oyster shells. Exfoliation. Roman style. A nearby whisper suggests that mixing it with fermented wine helps draw out impurities. You're not sure whether they mean from the skin or the soul. Women, when allowed into the baths, had their own beauty rituals, rubbing crushed pearls on the face, applying kohl to the eyes, and using rose oil for scent. The ingredients ranged from delightful to deranged. Snail slime, lizard liver, powdered mouse bones, whatever it took to glow in candlelight, apparently. You glance over at a slave pouring hot water from a bronze ewer onto his master's feet. The man leans back, eyes closed, smiling as though this is the peak of human experience. Maybe it is for him. You're still worried your eyebrows will fall off from the vaporized vinegar someone used as a facial steam across the room. There's also the ever-popular depilation. Yes, hair removal. The Romans were obsessed with smooth skin. No razors here, though. They used pumice stones, resins, or sometimes even a paste made from arsenic and quicklime. Efficient? Probably. Safe? Definitely not. You watch as one poor soul tries to endure it without flinching. He fails. Still, the bathhouse isn't just about physical transformation. It's about public perception. Looking polished, literally, meant you were civilized. Smooth skin, scented oils, clean nails. If you looked unkempt, people assumed your mind was equally disorganized. It's a theory that probably hasn't aged all that badly. One of the more eccentric characters enters the room, a self-proclaimed philosopher, shirtless, bearded, carrying a small scroll under one arm and smelling like overripe olives. He loudly offers unsolicited advice about balancing the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. You pretend to be asleep. It doesn't help. A group of bath attendants shuffle past carrying wooden trays of grooming supplies, bronze nail scrapers, tweezers, and small jars of powdered minerals. They look like tools for performing delicate surgery or amateur alchemy. But here, they're part of the grooming ritual. Someone is humming, a strange melody. You peek around and spot a singer warming up his voice with slow scales. He's preparing for a performance in the next room, a semi-private recital for a small audience lounging in robes, sipping diluted wine. That's later, but it adds a sense of quiet anticipation to the room. Because here, pampering leads seamlessly into performance. You stretch. Your muscles ache but pleasantly. The scent of mint oil and smoke lingers. One corner of the room features an odd contraption, a hollow bronze sphere used for heating oil. The oil inside bubbles softly, glowing with firelight. It feels ancient, even to you, like something from a temple, not a bathhouse. A man stirs it occasionally, murmuring that the temperature has to be just right. You nod, pretending to understand. Then, a sudden commotion. Someone's precious jar of imported myrrh oil has gone missing. A small, panicked argument erupts. Theft is rare but not unheard of in these crowded spaces. The victim threatens to consult a haruspex, a fortune teller who reads omens in animal entrails. You suspect that won't help, but admire the drama of it all. And while the stolen oil mystery simmers, you finally rise. Light-headed but a bit more fragrant than before. You catch your reflection in the polished bronze of a nearby pitcher. You look Roman, slightly flushed, vaguely irritated and glistening with herbs. You leave the tepidarium behind, stepping through an arched doorway as the scent of roasted chickpeas and fresh bread wafts in from somewhere nearby. Because next, it's snack time. The warm air shifts as you pass into a wider chamber. Your stomach growls not subtly. And why wouldn't it? The Romans, ever the masters of excess, decided that no bathing experience was complete without a full buffet. Welcome the part of the bathhouse where you're expected to lounge half-dressed on a cushioned bench while nibbling on something fried in olive oil and trying not to spill garum sauce on your knee. At the centre of the room stands a modest food counter. Think of it as the ancient version of a snack bar, only run by a man in sandals with a suspiciously stained apron and a pet monkey on a leash. Clay amphorae line the shelves behind him, filled with olives, pickled eggs, spiced nuts, and yes, fermented fish sauce. The infamous garum, Rome's all-purpose condiment. You can smell it before you see it. You approach cautiously. He offers you a fig wrapped in bacon. You accept. It's warm, slightly sweet, and tastes vaguely like triumph. Or maybe that's the rosemary oil from earlier. Either way, you're not complaining. To your left, a group reclines around a stone table, sipping watered wine and cracking jokes about provincial governors. The wine is cheap, but chilled by snow packed in jars, imported from mountain regions and stored in deep cellars under the baths. Only slightly melted, which somehow makes it fancier. One man gestures animatedly with a skewer of roasted sausage. Another flicks bits of bread at his friend. There's laughter, shouting, a debate about the best method to cook dormice. Yes, dormice, a delicacy in the wealthier circles. Stuffed with herbs and honey, then roasted whole. Historians still argue whether the average Roman truly enjoyed this, or simply pretended to for clout. You're not sure you want to find out firsthand. There's also fruit, pomegranates, grapes, dates, as well as flatbreads sprinkled with sea salt. A woman nearby offers you a honey cake, slightly crumbling at the edges. You nod in thanks, mouthful, before you realise she's probably trying to sell you something. Too late. The space buzzes with noise, but no one seems to mind. This is the most human part of the bathhouse experience. The thermopolium, or food vendor area, was usually located within or near the palaestra, the exercise courtyard, but often spilled into lounging rooms like this one. It's where the sweaty met the sauced. Conversations flowed freely, fueled by carbohydrates and low expectations. Politics, too, crept into the room. A retired centurion retells a clearly embellished tale of how he once bathed next to Emperor Hadrian. Someone raises an eyebrow. Hadrian hasn't been alive for decades. The centurion shrugs. Detailed. Meanwhile, someone else brings up an actual decree, issued during Tiberius's reign, banning certain food items in public baths because too many people were getting sick from spoilt meat left in the heat. Predictably, no one in the room follows that rule. In a quiet corner, an older man plays a lyre. The sound blends with the soft splash of water nearby. A few listeners lean in, nodding rhythmically. One woman claps once, offbeat, then pretends she was just swatting a fly. A surprising number of philosophical debates happen mid-snack. You overhear a heated discussion about stoicism and whether one can truly be indifferent to burned bread. A younger man insists it's a metaphor. The older one shouts, "It's breakfast," and storms off, muttering about Epicurus and yeast. Food in Roman baths wasn't limited to casual grazing. There were feasts, sometimes organised, sometimes spontaneous. Someone would sponsor an evening spread, a wealthy patron trying to win favour, or a local official hoping to distract from a recent scandal. You can almost imagine it. Torches flickering, platters heaped with boar, musicians weaving through guests in togas askew from steam and wine. But even in smaller moments like this, food served a purpose. It kept people around. It made the bathhouse more than a place to rinse off. It turned it into a destination, a social net, and frankly, an excuse to spend the afternoon in a towel while slowly turning into a prune. You reach for another fig, only to find your hands slippery from residual oil. You fumble, it bounces off your knee, no one notices. You casually pretend it never existed. Next to you, two teenage boys compare scar patterns from wrestling. One lifts his tunic just a bit too high. Another laughs, then splashes him with wine. Their guardian, a tired-looking uncle with wine-stained teeth, doesn't even flinch. You decide it's time to move on before someone starts juggling amphorae again. One last sip of diluted wine, and you slide off the bench, cheeks warm, fingers sticky. The room fades behind you, still alive with clinking cups and laughter as you follow a curved hallway toward a different kind of performance. Next stop, poetry and philosophy, echoing off wet marble walls. You wander further along the curving corridors of the bathhouse, and soon you find yourself drawn to an expansive open-air courtyard, where an entirely different scene unfolds. Here, the ambience shifts seamlessly from the steamy intimacy of previous rooms to a more relaxed, convivial atmosphere, where light, laughter, and the clink of wooden cups fill the air. In this setting, under a sky streaked with the soft glow of twilight, guests recline on cushioned stone benches beside a broad, shimmering pool. Everyone is half-dressed, draped in simple tunics or nothing at all, except the remnants of earlier layers of oil and dust. This courtyard is more than a place for quiet contemplation. It's a dining hall under the open sky, where snacks, booze, and even heated sausages become part of the elaborate ritual of Roman leisure. You ease yourself onto a low bench placed adjacent to the cool water, feeling the residual warmth of the day's steam gently mingle with the crisp air above. Nearby, a vendor has set up a wooden table laden with an assortment of food that seems almost too vibrant to be real. Plump olives, flatbread sprinkled with fragrant herbs, and bowls of soft cheese glisten invitingly under the fading light. Most eye-catching, however, is a sizzling array of sausages, their skin charred to a perfect golden brown by an ingenious heating mechanism. These aren't ordinary sausages. They are meticulously prepared with spiced meats and wrapped in leaves that enhance their flavor, a delicacy that boldly blends everyday sustenance with culinary innovation. You pick up a small skewer and sample one of these heated sausages. Its savory aroma envelops you as you bite into it, revealing a burst of flavors that is both familiar and tantalizingly exotic. The taste of the spiced meat, complemented by hints of garlic and fresh herbs, is oddly comforting. A few guests around you are engaged in animated conversation, their voices soft but animated, discussing everything from the latest political intrigues to trivial anecdotes of personal triumph. You can sense that this dining ritual is not merely about satisfying hunger. It's a celebration of life, an indulgence in the everyday pleasures that punctuate the relentless heat of the day. As you savor your snack, you listen to a group of well-dressed men, reclining side by side, chortling over a rare, impromptu performance. One man juggles a set of small, heated sausages, sending a few rolling off the bench in a playful defiance of decorum. Another, his eyes twinkling with mischief, narrates a humorous tale of a former senator who once tried to reinvent the art of toasting in the bath, declaring that the secret to good politics lay in the perfect char on one's sausage. You let out a soft chuckle, amused at how even the most mundane aspects of Roman daily life can transmute into something unexpectedly vibrant under the open sky. Around you, the buzz of conversation grows richer as local musicians strike up a gentle tune. The melody is soothing yet invigorating, like a lullaby mixed with an ancient folk dance. You begin to notice that the dining experience here is not just an afterthought, but a vital extension of bathhouse culture. It is well documented in historical accounts that public feasting was a communal affair, often taking place in the same complexes where baths were enjoyed. This arrangement was designed, some say, to reinforce social bonds and to smooth over differences with good humor and even better food. Historians still argue Whether the casual dining that followed the baths was a deliberate political strategy or simply an organic outcome of Roman conviviality. In one corner, a cluster of younger men exchanged tips on the best spots for procuring the secret ingredients of these culinary wonders. They speak in hushed tones about a legendary spice trader from the East whose exotic mix of aromas is said to elevate even the humblest sausage to divine status. You take a moment to observe a particularly quirky detail, a vendor who claims to have a personal recipe that includes a hint of dragon's breath seasoning. Whether it is a fanciful boast or a genuine ingredient remains unverified. Nonetheless, it sparks lively whispers among the diners. You lean back, letting the ambiance ease your tension. The gentle clamour of voices, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter and the soft crackle of wood fires, creates a soundscape that is both timeless and oddly modern. Groups converse over shared platters, their discussions laced with tongue-in-cheek commentary on everything from the quality of local olive oil to the merits of strictly following an ancient recipe. One man drolls, "In Rome, even our snacks are steeped in the art of debate," and his words resonate as you consider the complex social choreography at play around you. Every so often, a passing servant offers a refill of diluted wine, served in shallow clay cups that evoke both simplicity and luxury. The wine's taste is tart yet mellow, striking a balance between refreshment and the inevitable drowsiness that settles over you after a hearty meal. You pair the wine with another sausage, its juices mingling with the savoury fat on your fingertips. You momentarily lose yourself in the rhythm of the scene, a continuous cycle of eating, drinking, and laughing that seems to suspend time. The crowd's energy takes on an almost theatrical quality as a well-known local poet steps forward to recite verses inspired by the very act of dining at the baths. His words are playful, mixing classical references with the light-hearted absurdity of everyday Roman life. He muses about how a single sausage might embody the complex web of cultural influences that define Rome, and as he speaks, his voice becomes a gentle cadence that nearly lulls you into sleep. You drift from the courtyard full of laughter and sausages into a narrower, cooler corridor, only to be beckoned by the echo of a theatrical sigh. Somewhere ahead, someone is reciting verse with the kind of passion typically reserved for dramatic breakups or stubbed toes. You follow the sound, stepping lightly over the mosaic tiles until you emerge into a domed chamber. The lecture lounge, for lack of a better term. And here, in the steam-slicked glow of flickering oil lamps, Rome's bathhouse becomes less spa and more stage. A poet stands at the centre, barefoot, damp, and completely in his element. He gestures wildly with a scroll in one hand and a fig in the other. His toga is barely hanging on, and yet he commands the room like Cicero reborn. His audience, a mix of scholars, loafers, and one man who looks like he just wandered in looking for his sandals, nods along, some grinning, some politely pretending to be awake. You find a spot against a warm marble column and settle in. This is more common than you'd expect. Roman baths were often centres of public culture, where writers would test their verses, philosophers would muse about the meaning of life, and comedians, yes, comedians, would deliver jokes about politics, aging, and overly aggressive masseuses. It's performance art with a hint of sweat. Tonight's theme appears to be love in the time of warm oil. The poet belts out lines about stolen glances across the frigidarium, unspoken feelings shared between two strangers in the tepidarium mist, and a tragic romance ruined by an improperly applied strigil. The room erupts in laughter. Even the guy who lost his sandal chuckles. You're not sure if it's good poetry or just good timing, but it works. Then comes the next act. A philosopher with wild hair and eyes that say, "I haven't slept since the reign of Augustus." He launches into a speech about the illusion of pleasure, that the warmth of the baths is nothing compared to the inner fire of the soul, that happiness lies not in wine, nor massage, nor even tragically in spiced sausages. Someone booed lightly at that line, but even here, in this stew of ideas, there's room for levity. Philosophers took themselves seriously, but the bathhouse made it hard to maintain too much dignity. There's something inherently humbling about arguing about metaphysics while your feet soak in lukewarm water and a dog sniffs your tunic. You recognize another voice, a local satirist, famous or infamous for his bathhouse routines. He delivers a short skit impersonating the bathhouse staff, the oil boy who judges you with his eyebrows, the masseur who whispers philosophy while cracking your spine, the snack vendor who always pretends your coins are counterfeit. The room roars. Someone nearly spills their cup of wine. You can't help but laugh too. And here's the odd truth. Romans appreciated comedy. Not the grand tragedies of the stage or dry wit of politics, though those had their place, but the everyday absurdities of life. Bathhouses, full of half-naked egos and overheated conversations, were fertile ground. Historians still argue whether this space counts as formal theatre or informal release valve for public tension, but most agree it was essential. You're reminded of a famous anecdote. The Emperor Hadrian once reportedly paused mid-bath to recite verse, only to be one-upped by a cheeky poet in the crowd. Rather than punish him, Hadrian applauded. It became the stuff of legend, a tale repeated in every corner bathhouse with a wink and a nudge. A woman steps forward now, perhaps a poetess, or just someone brave. She recites a biting epigram about her husband, comparing his storytelling to wet sponges, squishy, slow, and impossible to dry out. A man at the back groans in recognition. The poem ends with a punchline about snoring through speeches. Applause. She bows, modest and triumphant. You notice a boy of about 12, perched quietly in the corner, scribbling on a wax tablet. Copying the verses? Sketching a future joke? Or simply imagining himself as a future Cicero? The scene feels timeless. This little performance corner may not be in your history textbooks, but it's where culture happened. Quietly, rowdily, and with remarkable self-awareness. One elderly man clears his throat and begins to sing. Not a performance exactly, but a kind of wandering melody. A bathhouse hymn. No one stops him. It weaves between conversations like steam, not commanding attention but rewarding it if you listen close. A patron nearby begins quoting Ovid's Metamorphoses, but only the funny bits, the ones with gods turning into questionable animals and chasing each other around in morally grey scenarios. Laughter bubbles again. Someone raises a toast with a half-empty jug of cider. You begin to realise this is Rome at its most human. Not on the battlefield, not in the Senate, but here, where art, ego, laughter and olive oil collide. And none of it, none, is performed in full clothing. As you rise to leave, a passing performer taps you on the shoulder. He grins, leans in and whispers a line from Marshall. He bathes, he dines, he laughs, but never pays. You blink. Is that directed at you? Too late. He's already vanished into the mist. You exit the chamber, smile lingering, head filled with verses and sausage jokes. You wonder what's next in this strange, steaming maze of marble. You're not done yet. Next up, oiled muscles, competitive grappling, and the Roman version of gym bros. You follow the soft shuffle of feet and the faint thud of bodies into a wide rectangular courtyard, the palestra. This is the bathhouse gym, and it smells exactly like you'd expect. Oil, dust, and pride. Warm air lingers here too, but not from steam pipes. This heat comes from movement. Muscles flex under the sun, sandals scrape across stone, and egos do more heavy lifting than biceps ever could. It hits you right away. These guys aren't here to unwind. They're here to perform, and maybe dislocate a shoulder. Two men, broad-chested and shiny with fresh olive oil, are circling each other in a shallow sandpit. One grunts, lunges, and tries to pin the other's arm in a lock that looks as if it might end in a lawsuit if lawyers existed. The crowd murmurs, but no one intervenes. A bystander casually snacks on a fig as a full-grown man is slammed to the ground with the elegance of a falling amphora. Yes, wrestling was a regular part of the Roman bath experience, not just for fun, but for fitness, competition, and sometimes to settle disputes that began over who stole whose favourite towel. Grappling, boxing, and discus throwing were all on the menu. The palestra wasn't just a gym, it was a public arena of pride. You spot a group of younger boys in one corner, practicing a sort of soft shoe version of wrestling, supervised by a leathery old coach with a cane and an expression of eternal disappointment. He claps once, shouts, again, and they dutifully flop onto each other like well-oiled laundry. To one side, a man in his 50s is still lifting a heavy stone disc while muttering, "Just one more," to no one in particular. He's been doing that for 20 minutes. You decide not to interrupt his journey. And it's not just men. In some cities and eras, women also trained in separate palaestrae, especially during the later empire. These spaces were not just about strength, they were about status. Being physically fit, glistening with oil, and surrounded by an appreciative audience was in many ways the Instagram of the ancient world. Historians still argue whether these contests were more about health or showing off, but it's safe to say flexing was definitely involved. You pause by a rack of equipment, balls stuffed with grain, hand weights shaped like large boomerangs, and something that looks suspiciously like a skipping rope, though it might just be a belt someone left behind after a dramatic loss. Nearby, a man rubs his shoulder and launches into a boastful tale about how he once bested a Gaul in a 2-hour wrestling match that ended with both of them accidentally falling into the caldarium. His audience, mostly uninterested, nods along. The Gaul in question is nowhere to be found. You suspect he might have had a different version of the story. Suddenly, a loud thwack echoes across the courtyard. Someone has attempted a dramatic flying tackle and succeeded only in landing on their elbow. The crowd gasps, then chuckles, then forgets, because a man with biceps the size of amphorae walks by, and all attention diverts instantly. Some attendees, less inclined to grapple, take up ball games instead. Harpastum, a kind of full-contact handball meets rugby, is being played with wild enthusiasm. The ball ricochets off a wall, then a face. Nobody apologizes, it's part of the game. Others jog gentle laps around the perimeter, their sandals slapping rhythmically against the ground. Not all Romans came to the baths to brawl. Some simply wanted to sweat their anxieties away. One man jogs by and mumbles affirmations to himself. "I am powerful. I am balanced. I will not trip again." Moments later, he does. And while all this is happening, an entire squad of bathhouse staff quietly clean up, raking the sand, gathering discarded towels and picking up broken bits of ego. You spot a physician standing nearby, eyeing the action with the detached concern of someone who knows he'll be resetting at least one shoulder before sundown. He carries a leather pouch of herbs and bandages and wears a tunic that says, "I told you not to do that." You nod respectfully. He nods back, tired. There's an air of ritual to all of it. The application of oil before the match, the strigil scraping after, the careful balance of display and endurance. You can tell some of the wrestlers are pretending to go harder than they actually are. Grunting theatrically, falling artfully, timing their moves to match the attention of the crowd. Even here, performance and pride are inseparable. You're handed a damp towel by a young attendant. You didn't ask for it, but take it anyway. It's unclear whether this is a sign that you should join in or sit down. You choose the latter. An older man sits beside you, puffing slightly from his last round of calisthenics. He turns and says, "You know, in my youth I could take down 3 of them." You nod, impressed. "Now I just watch and critique form," he adds with a wheeze. He then points out every technical flaw in the last match, offering unsolicited commentary like a sports analyst with nothing to lose. As the afternoon wears on, the crowd thins, the matches slow, muscles sag. Eventually, the show-offs retire to the steam rooms and the bruised head for the cold plunge. The noise softens to a hush broken only by the slap of sandals and the soft creak of stretching joints. You stand, a little lightheaded from sun and laughter. The sweat cools on your skin as a breeze flows through the colonnade. You pass a wall etched with names, graffiti left by proud winners, sore losers, and a few hopeful romantics. You see one that reads, "I beat Marcus here, and I took his tunic." You step away from You walk along a hallway lined with flickering oil lamps, their golden light dancing lazily across painted walls. The laughter and thuds of the palaestra now fade behind you, replaced by murmurs, low giggles, and the occasional splash. You turn a corner and enter one of the more peculiar and perhaps most entertaining chambers of the Roman bathhouse, the social lounge. But unofficially, and much more accurately, it's known as the flirtatorium. This is where the oil-slicked bodies are less about sport and more about suggestion. You take a seat on a wide stone bench, warm from the last occupant, and survey the scene. The air smells faintly of rosewater, and there's a perfume to the atmosphere. Less from actual scent, and more from the theatrical mix of casual posing and deliberate glancing. Romans didn't bathe alone, and sometimes they didn't bathe just for hygiene, politics, or sore muscles. Sometimes they came here for what the philosophers delicately called social exchange. That is, the long, drawn-out dance of eye contact, barely concealed compliments, and trying not to trip over your own sandals while impressing someone reclining under a marble bust of Venus. You see it happening immediately. A young man in a cobalt blue tunic, clearly styled to cling just the right amount, laughs a little too loudly at a passing joke, just as a woman walking by turns her head to check the water temperature. Their eyes lock. She smiles. He pretends to check his reflection in the surface of a nearby bronze pitcher. It's like watching a soap opera where everyone's slightly steamed. A cluster of teenagers whisper nearby, daring each other to talk to someone across the pool. One of them starts walking, loses his nerve, and suddenly veers off to get more water. Smooth. Even in togas, the awkwardness of young crushes survives the centuries. And this isn't new behaviour. The Roman baths were often mixed-gender spaces, depending on the time of day and the city's customs. Some emperors banned mixed bathing outright, like Hadrian or Marcus Aurelius, while others, like Commodus, reportedly ignored such rules altogether. Historians still argue whether mixed bathing was scandalous or simply practical, but the truth, as always, seems to lie somewhere in between olive oil and opportunity. You lean back and take in the architecture. Statues of gods and goddesses line the room, positioned strategically so that no matter where you sit, a marble deity is watching. Cupid, holding his bow and looking a little too smug. Venus, casually perfect in stone. Hercules, flexing forever. The implication is clear. Flirtation here is not just allowed, it's practically encouraged. Someone nearby begins reciting a love poem. It's technically about a nymph and a shepherd, but the glances he casts across the pool suggest there's a more specific muse in the room. The poem ends with the line, "And her sandals, worn but blessed, walked on my heart." A few listeners sigh. One man coughs politely. A woman in the corner mutters, "Try a new one." Of course, not everyone here is a romantic. Some are married and pretending not to be. Others are just here for the warm water and a well-placed compliment. But many, like you, are simply soaking in the spectacle. Flirtation in Roman times was a strange and coded thing. A dropped towel could be an accident, or a proposition. A shared cup of wine might be hospitality, or an invitation. A lingering glance near the tepidarium door could signal everything, or nothing at all. The real trick was knowing when to read the signs and when to laugh them off. You spot an older couple sitting close together, their conversation a slow, soft exchange that radiates comfort. They've clearly been coming here for years. Their flirtation isn't in glances, it's in familiarity. In one corner, a young woman paints delicate lines of makeup around her eyes, using a polished piece of bronze as a mirror. She's framed by a backdrop of palm-painted plaster and watching the room like a strategist. You can almost hear the mental notes she's taking. Graffiti near the changing room speaks volumes too. Scratched into the stone are declarations of affection, praise for anonymous beauties, and some enthusiastic but grammatically challenged verses like, "Lucia, your walk slays more than Mars." You don't need to be a poet to make an impression, it seems. And what's perhaps most charming is the presence of subtle drama. A man walks in, spots two people seated together, and immediately spins on his heel. The pair exchange a guilty look. A love triangle or just an unpaid dinner tab? You'll never know. But the tension was theatrical enough to feel like a scripted scene. There's something timeless in all of it. The shy smiles, the exaggerated confidence, the shared citrus fruit handed from one bather to another, with just a bit too much ceremony. You begin to wonder whether the bathhouse was the ancient Roman version of a dating app, except it smelled like herbs and had fewer buttons. The room hums with warmth, both literal and emotional. You breathe in, feeling the atmosphere settle around you like linen sheets and lavender oil. Somewhere in the background, a flute begins to play. The notes are soft, meandering. A few heads tilt toward the sound. No one speaks. It's the kind of moment that could belong to any century. You stand to leave, your steps echoing faintly. The statues watch silently. The glances continue, the games go on. And next, you'll discover that under all this polished beauty and carefully choreographed charm, the hygiene situation is, well, a little messier than advertised. You leave behind the heat of stolen glances and enter what looks like a polished sanctuary of health. Sunlight filters in from a high oculus, bouncing off sleek white marble, painted ceilings, and rows of elegant columns. It's the kind of space that makes you think, surely this is where cleanliness reigns supreme. You'd be wrong. You're standing in the natatio, the open-air swimming pool flanked by yet another hot room and a warm one. Around you, bathers glide through the water like dolphins, or in some cases like confused sea cows. The pool sparkles, at least from a distance. Up close, you start to wonder. You dip a toe in. It's not bad, but you can't shake the suspicion that it's less about cleanliness and more about dilution. Here's the truth. Romans loved their baths, but they didn't quite define clean the same way you might. The water wasn't drained between guests. It was, at best, filtered through a series of sand and charcoal trenches. At worst, it sat there all day like a warm, communal soup, thickened by the efforts of several hundred sweaty citizens and the occasional stray leaf, coin, or mystery object. And soap? Nope. Romans used oil to lift the dirt and then scraped it off with a curved bronze blade called a strigil. That gunk, oil, sweat, dust, bits of dead skin, was collected in jars by attendants. Sometimes it was discarded. Sometimes it was resold as medicine. Yes, someone, somewhere, rubbed someone else's scraped-off grime on a wound, believing it held healing properties. Historians still argue whether this was a niche quack remedy or surprisingly common. Either way, you're going to rethink that skincare routine. There were attendants, of course, who did their best to keep things tidy. Buckets of fresh water were dumped regularly into hot rooms. Floors were scrubbed with herbs, sometimes vinegar. But with so many bodies, so many feet, and so much oil, things got swampy fast. Pliny the Elder, bless his ever-observant soul, once noted that baths are excellent for the spirit, but not always for the feet. And that smell you noticed earlier, that faint scent of lavender and ambition, it's working overtime to mask something less poetic. Beneath it lies the unmistakable hint of mildew, wet linen, and that weird odor produced only by hundreds of warm humans in varying degrees of conversation and crisis. Still, no one complains, because this is Rome. And the appearance of cleanliness matters more than the scientific kind. There's a saying scratched into the wall near the frigidarium. A clean man is one who bathes daily and asks no questions. You wade a bit deeper into the pool, cautiously optimistic. The water is lukewarm, stirred gently by swimmers performing their own version of synchronized floating. To your right, a man performs exaggerated strokes, clearly more interested in being seen than moving anywhere. To your left, a child launches himself from the edge and belly flops so dramatically you half expect him to be fined by the Senate. There are small fountains too, ornamental dolphins spouting water into the pool, purely for decoration. One is missing a nose, another has graffiti under it that reads, "Cassius was here, and wet." You exit the pool via a set of slippery marble steps, careful not to do what every Roman dreads: fall, dramatically, in front of someone you're trying to impress. You pass an alcove where a man is vigorously using a sponge on a stick. Yes, a sponge on a stick. Or tersorium. Originally for bathroom duties, but apparently repurposed for general scrubbing, you choose not to look too closely. In another corner, a vendor sells clay pots of homemade perfume. He waves one under your nose. It smells like cinnamon and old wine. You thank him and edge away before he offers you a bulk discount. You catch sight of a servant pouring heated water into the warm pool. He miscalculates and ends up splashing a senator, who gasps dramatically but does nothing. Status in the bathhouse was oddly flexible. You might be a nobleman, but if you're half naked and someone accidentally dumps water on you, your only weapon is passive aggression. You dry off with a linen towel that smells vaguely of time and regrets. As you do, you overhear a lively conversation between two older bathers discussing the purest bathhouse in the empire. One swears by the baths of Caracal. The other insists nothing beats the springs at Baiai. A third chimes in from across the pool, claiming all of them were equally filthy but had better acoustics. This, apparently, matters. Despite the questionable hygiene, these baths functioned as a health institution. Physicians often recommended regular bathing for ailments ranging from indigestion to melancholy. They even used steam rooms as part of fevers treatment. You imagine a worried mother somewhere telling her son, "You're not sick, you just haven't bathed in 3 days." And so you realize, for all their faults, Roman baths weren't about antiseptic purity. They were about rhythm, daily rituals, shared space, the illusion of control in a very chaotic empire. You weren't getting clean, you were becoming Roman. You wrap your towel tighter and head toward the final chambers. The hygiene may be behind you, but the mystery of behavior still awaits. Because next, you'll unravel the unspoken signals, strange customs, and awkward faux pas that make up the ancient etiquette of the Roman bathing ritual. You step into a quieter corridor now, narrower, less dramatic. The walls here are more modestly decorated, the lighting softer. No sausage jugglers, no sweaty philosophers, just the low hum of casual voices and the occasional creak of damp sandals on polished stone. You've reached the part of the bathhouse that isn't really about water or oil or marble grandeur. It's about rules. Not the kind carved on tablets or shouted by officials. No, these are the unspoken rituals, subtle gestures, and strange little customs passed down from bather to bather. You quickly realize the Roman bathhouse had its own language, and if you didn't speak it, well, you might end up offending a senator, getting cold water dumped on your head, or worse, being publicly corrected by an elderly man with too much free time. The first signal you spot is a flick of the hand, a casual wave over the shoulder that means, "I'm saving this bench." You almost sat there. Almost. That would have been your first mistake. Another nearby bather gestures toward a stack of strigils, eyebrows raised, and without a word, an attendant appears with a fresh towel. Communication here is part theatre, part ESP. Take the strigil, for instance. This curved tool isn't just for scraping oil off your body. It's a signal of experience, how you hold it, how vigorously you use it. Whether you clean it in public or discreetly, these are all social cues. A man using a gold-plated strigil is either showing off or overcompensating. One with a chipped, dull blade, probably irregular and not someone to underestimate. Then there's the clap. 2 sharp claps and a pause. It's how you summon an attendant to bring hot water, or in some cases, to fetch your forgotten sandals. Clapping too loudly? Rude. Clapping too often? Entitled. Not clapping at all? Amateur. You try it once, lightly. A boy appears, takes one look at you, shrugs, and walks away. You'll need to work on your technique. Etiquette extends to posture too. Lounging on a bench with both arms stretched. Acceptable only if the bathhouse is less crowded. Sprawling across 2 benches. Aggressive. Sitting cross-legged. Intellectual. Standing for no reason while staring into the middle distance. Poetic, possibly suspicious. And don't even get started on towel folding. There are actual expectations. 1 fold indicates you're still using it. 2 folds, you've abandoned it. No folds, free towel, but you'd better be fast. Graffiti in Pompeii famously reads, "Do not steal another man's towel, for he may chase you naked." You hope it wasn't written from experience, but statistically, it probably was. The conversation rules are equally complex. Small talk is fine if it's about sports, weather, or which fish sauce brand is currently overrated. Political debate is allowed, but only with someone wearing fewer rings than you. Philosophy? Acceptable, but only if you don't quote anything longer than 4 lines. And if you must mention the emperor, keep your tone ambiguous. You watch an exchange between two elderly men who seem to be arguing over whether the frigidarium is too cold today. Their voices are calm, but their toes are aggressively pointed. There is a kind of passive-aggressive ballet happening with their elbows. Eventually, a younger bather places a ladle of warm water on the stones between them. The tension dissolves. Crisis averted. Certain objects carry meaning too. A particular kind of oil flask, aribalos, with intricate etchings, status. A simple terracotta jug, practical. No jug at all. Either you forgot it, or you're trying to flirt your way into borrowing one. Some bathers wear jewellery, not much but enough to make a statement. A single bangle on the wrist suggests artistic tendencies. A necklace with a small charm, superstition. A ring on the middle toe, either fashion or rebellion. Historians still argue whether the trend began as a joke or a genuine attempt to impress Neptune. You notice that bathhouse etiquette also includes spatial awareness. Sitting too close is only acceptable if you're sharing wine or a family resemblance. Otherwise, keep at least a forearm's width of distance between you and the nearest neighbour. In a particularly cramped bathhouse, there were reports of people using carved wooden sticks to politely nudge an encroaching bather back into their lane. Imagine being publicly herded because your knee invaded someone's drying zone. You pass a wall where dozens of small carvings have been etched over the years. Simple stick figures with arms raised, waves drawn beneath their feet, and odd little symbols next to them. No one can quite explain them. Messages, warnings, early comic strips. One of them shows a man slipping on soap that didn't exist. Maybe some things are timeless. And then there's silence etiquette. Some rooms, especially the sudatorium, the sweat chamber, were treated like sacred zones. No loud talking, no laughter. If you dropped your strigil, you had to recover it silently, or risk being glared at by a man meditating on the nature of existence, while his pores opened dramatically. In this world, a raised eyebrow carries more meaning than a speech. A slight turn of the foot, a half-lifted jug, the angle of a wrist, it's all part of a language you're only beginning to grasp. You wonder how many tourists through the ages misunderstood these signs and left the baths not refreshed, but publicly shamed and slightly exfoliated. You take one final stroll through the etiquette zone, proud that you haven't insulted anyone today, at least not visibly. You nod at a man who nods back. Victory. And just ahead, through an arched doorway, the light shifts. A slow warmth pulses from within. Time to leave the rules behind. Next, echoes of empire, crumbling marble, and the memory of a civilization that once soaked its greatness in steam. You pass beneath a wide archway, the last threshold between the bustling present of Roman life and something deeper, something older. The noise dims behind you. The steam has thinned. Even the air seems to pause. You're in the heart of the bathhouse now, and somehow also at the edge of it. This is the Laconicum, the dry, intense hot room, built not for pleasure, but for reflection, both physical and metaphorical. It's quieter here, and the domed ceiling swallows the sound of your steps. The light from the small central oculus falls like a spotlight onto the cracked tiles below. You take a seat on a warm stone bench and lean back, letting the silence settle over your shoulders. The walls are lined with fading frescoes, gods in repose, feasts eternal, mythologies now more memory than scripture. Around you, the marble is chipped, a little worn, but still dignified. The bathhouse, once the pulse of the city, is showing its age. And somehow, that only adds to its grandeur. You close your eyes for a moment, just breathing in the warmth. The same kind of warmth emperors once knew, slaves, philosophers, thieves, all soaked in the same steam, spoke the same etiquette, told the same jokes. The baths were one of the few places in Roman life where lines blurred, where rank shimmered, not vanished, but shimmered, like oil on water. The bathhouses of Rome weren't just buildings, they were symbols. of power, of culture, of the idea that civilization meant more than conquest. It meant comfort too. Heated floors and plumbed water, spaces for leisure, libraries tucked beside pools, philosophy echoing across sweat-streaked walls. These weren't spas, they were the empire, distilled, and that empire knew how to impress. Take the baths of Caracal, grand, towering, decorated with marble shipped from across the known world. They had domes large enough to echo a whisper tenfold, gardens outside, statues so finely carved they seemed alive in the mist. Thousands of bathers came daily, merchants, senators, tourists, fortune-tellers, bakers, widows, poets, all drawn into the steam. But time, well, time doesn't care about plumbing. You think about the systems beneath your feet, the hypercausts, those ancient furnaces pumping heat through hollow bricks and raised floors, a marvel of engineering, until they cracked, until the fires died, until the funds stopped coming in and no one showed up to fix the leaks, and slowly, quietly, the steam vanished. The bathhouses fell into ruin over centuries. Some were stripped for materials, marble turned into lime, lead pipes hauled away and melted, statues stolen or buried, moss crept up the columns, toads replaced toga-clad philosophers. But for a time, for centuries, this was daily life. Predictable, rich, ridiculous. Historians still argue what made them decline first. Was it the economy, the invasions, the rise of Christianity, which frowned upon co-ed public nudity and strigal jokes? Maybe it wasn't one thing, but a slow unravelling, like a towel left too long in the heat, fraying at the edges. Still, the memory lingers. Modern spas owe them, modern plumbing owes them, even modern relaxation. Our concept of wellness as something you seek, not stumble into, is rooted in this mosaic-covered, slightly damp tradition. Somewhere, someone lighting a candle for their bubble bath doesn't realise they're echoing something 2,000 years old. You open your eyes again. A man sits across from you, elderly, deeply wrinkled, wrapped in a threadbare towel. He nods, not at you specifically, just in acknowledgement of shared presence. A flick of the fingers, a gesture of peace. You nod back. And you wonder, how many nods like this happened over the centuries? How many unspoken friendships? How many silent apologies, quiet rivalries, sudden romances sparked in the steam? Graffiti found in ancient bathhouses paints a vivid picture, not always flattering but deeply human. Scribbles like, "I bathed here and forgot my sandals," again. Or Marcus smells but he's kind to his mother. These are the marks of real people, not just names in history books. Bathhouse walls, it turns out, were humanity's first Twitter, only hotter, and usually misspelled. Eventually your bench cools, the heat fades, the light from the oculus tilts and stretches toward the far corner of the room, brushing a cracked relief of Neptune, reclining on a wave. The empire may be dust, but this moment, this breath, this warmth remains. You stand slowly, wrap yourself in your towel, and begin the walk back through the chambers you now know so well. Past the tepidarium, where oil lingers like memory. Past the massage rooms, where herbs crushed under fingers released dreams. Past the open pools, echoing with laughter, flirtation, politics, and gossip. The world outside is colder, but you've carried something with you now. A stillness, a strange kinship with long-dead poets and towel thieves, and maybe the faintest scent of rosemary oil clinging to your elbow. And with that, you lie back now, far from the bustle of marble halls and whispered debates. The memory of warm tiles still lingers beneath your skin, a steady hum of comfort stretching through your limbs. Imagine the faint drip of water echoing in a stone chamber, the soft rustle of towels, the distant sighs of bathers long departed. The steam, gentle and slow, curls through vaulted ceilings and past sleeping statues. It carries no urgency, no voices now, just warmth. Your thoughts drift like perfumed mist through the quiet chambers of time, through long-forgotten jokes and stories half-told, across mosaics faded by 1,000 footsteps, and toward a night sky that's seen it all before. You are still, you are floating. The baths may crumble, the empires may fall, but the simple act of closing your eyes, of resting in a world filled with echoes and heat and old laughter, that remains. So let the warmth hold you a little longer. Let the marble cool around you. Let the night carry you away gently into sleep. You awaken on a sooty spring morning, rubbing grit from your eyelashes while coal barges groan along the river. The city hums like an overwound clock, every tick echoed by hoofbeats, and every tock by a costermonger hawking bruised apples. A printed flyer, marvel of modern post, demonstration at noon, flutters against your boot. It smells of fresh ink and yesterday's fish and chip grease. Victorian marketing is nothing if not resourceful. The address leads you to a lecture hall above a pawnbroker's shop, where peeling wallpaper curls like old stamps. Inside, a curious crowd clusters around Horatio Garraway, a lanky inventor whose moustache is waxed to dagger points. He wears the manic grin of a man balanced perfectly between genius and bankruptcy, quite possibly both. Garraway taps a pointer against a chalkboard sketch of a cat wearing a satchel. "Gentlefolk," he declares, voice echoing against cracked plaster. "London's letters shall soon ride on paws." With theatrical flourish, he lifts the lid of a wicker basket. A ginger tabby pops out, sporting a miniature mailbag, oil-tanned leather, brass clasp, the feline accessory you never knew you needed. The audience titters. One matron flutters her fan, uncertain whether she's witnessing progress or nonsense. Garraway's theory sounds straightforward. Train city cats to bound across rooftops, bypass choking traffic, and deliver urgent messages faster than any foot courier. You admire his optimism and suspect his tailor has already been paid in advance. Across the aisle, a bespectacled journalist scribbles notes. He leans over and whispers, "Historians still argue whether Garraway pinched the idea from a Belgian village or dreamed it up over gin." You nod sagely, pretending you're not just here for the feline fashion show. Garraway claps once. 2 assistants unlatch tiny gates, and 6 cats burst into the rafters, scattering like marbles on a tilted table. One disappears behind velvet curtains. Another perches atop a gas lamp, tail flicking with royal disdain. For the grand proof, a volunteer scribbles a note, "Send crumpets for tea," folds it small and tucks it into the ginger's pouch. Garraway opens a window, points to a distant townhouse roof, and gives the launch signal. The cat leaps, clears the sill, then immediately decides the neighbouring chimney pot is prime sunbathing real estate. 10 minutes slide by. A heckler hollers, "Cats always deliver, when they feel like it," scoring joke 2 and scattered applause. Determined to witness glory, you clamber onto the roof yourself. Victorian tiles are slick, so naturally your boots choose this moment to audition for an ice skating routine. Arms pinwheeling, you land in a heap of rain-soaked laundry. At least the sheets smell faintly of lavender, a rare scent in London air. From below, a scullery maid calls, "Mind my knickers, sir." Joke 3. Smartly delivered, unlike the letter still lounging in that chimney. By afternoon, the cat has accomplished nothing except an enviable nap. Garraway recalibrates, insisting this first attempt merely measures baseline rooftop enthusiasm. You suspect feline enthusiasm hovers somewhere between indifference and lunchtime. Still, the concept intrigues you. Cats already serve as London's unofficial night watch, patrolling alleys for rats the size of terriers. Why not recruit them as couriers? You picture tiny brass nameplates, engraved with titles like Sir Whiskers, Express Division, jingling as they sprint across the skyline. Mainstream fact interlude. By the 1860s, the British General Post Office processed nearly 2 billion letters annually. So many that delivery boys sometimes made a dozen trips to the same household on Christmas Eve. Any innovation, even one with whiskers, could ease that mountain of correspondence. Quirky tidbit to tuck under your pillow. Some Victorian families fitted beloved cats with tiny bells not only to warn songbirds, but also to help chimney sweeps locate pets trapped in flues. Imagine pairing that cheerful chime with a mailbag. The entire city might literally ring with correspondence. Stepping outside to take the public temperature, you meet an elderly postman, coat faded to brick pink. He confides he would gladly trade his £40 satchel for a squadron of striped tabbies, less backache, more purrs. Yet he wonders whether patrons will entrust love letters to creatures with a documented talent for shredding curtains out of spite. Evening settles like velvet smoke. Crossing Blackfriars Bridge, you watch packet boats ferry burlap mailbags toward the channel. Newly installed sodium lamps cast sickly halos on the water. Progress rarely flatters the night. A final chuckle escapes when you spot a street urchin tying a message to a random alley cat with string and a meat pie bribe. The cat, naturally, steals the pie and bolts, proving the pay scale needs revision. Gas lamps hiss. Your eyelids lower to half-mast. Dawn creeps over the channel like a half-awake cat stretching across a windowsill. And before you notice the time, a paddle steamer named Serendipity is chugging you toward Belgium. Its brass funnels cough coal-smelling sighs and gulls circle overhead, demanding breakfast royalties in stale crusts. You lean on the rail, pockets still sandy with London chimney grit, while a deckhand polishes a life preserver that reads, "Property of Liège Feline Post. Return if found. Especially you, Whiskers." Apparently the Belgians have no intention of losing either their cats or their sense of humour. Within hours you step onto the cobbled quay of Liège, a riverside city famed for armaments, waffles and, as you're about to learn, ambitious postal experiments featuring 37 house cats. A brisk spring wind fills your lungs with the scent of lilac and ironworks. Somewhere a church bell marks 10 o'clock, but the square outside the post office rings with a different music. Meows layered over polite applause, like an orchestra tuning to the world's least disciplined conductor. A semicircle of spectators, ladies in ribboned bonnets, mustachioed merchants, two monks clutching notebooks, face a raised platform. On it stands Postmaster René Delacroix, whose beard is so meticulously waxed that you wonder if Belgian law mandates such symmetry. He brandishes a parchment, strategic timeline of kitty couriers, inked with times that assume cats read schedules. You arch an eyebrow, remembering Garraway's baseline rooftop enthusiasm, and suspecting René may soon share that baseline, perhaps several rooftops lower. Beside him, wicker carriers rock gently as feline occupants test escape routes. Each cat wears a tiny oilskin mailbag, dyed burgundy and stamped with a golden lion rampant. Talk about postal fashion week. René addresses the crowd in rolling French, which a sprightly interpreter renders, "Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed felinophiles, behold the dawn of agile correspondence." A ripple of claps flutters through the audience. One of the monks crosses himself, either invoking divine blessing or apologizing in advance. René's plan is daring yet simple. Release all 37 cats at once from different city districts, each laden with practice letters, then time how quickly they return home. Timing charts dangle from clipboards like dangling toys in front of kittens, perhaps prophetic. You pass a table where an assistant ladles sardine broth into thimble-sized bowls, the official recovery treat. Joke 1 writes itself. Nothing motivates a Belgian cat like the promise of fish-flavoured espresso. The whistle blows, wicker doors unlatch, and instant pandemonium erupts. Cats burst forth in multicoloured comets, tabbies, tortoise shells, regal white Persians, all sprinting in seemingly purposeful directions. The crowd gasps, cheers. You jog after a ginger Tom named Bertrand. He leaps a canal gap you wouldn't brave on a dare, landing with gymnastic disdain, then vanishes between bakeries, exhaling warm yeast. You glimpse him again atop a butcher's awning, where strings of sausages swing like party bunting. Bertrand pauses, torn between duty and dinner. You mutter encouragement under your breath, though honestly, you'd choose the sausages too. That's joke 2, self-deprecation seasoned with appetite. In 1876, Liège truly conducted this feline postal trial. Contemporary newspapers reported that the fastest cat returned in less than 5 hours. while the slowest sauntered home the next morning, proving cats respect neither clocks nor human expectations. Back at Central Command, clerks pencil frantic updates onto chalkboards shaped like fishbones. René wipes sweat from his brow as runners dash in to declare arrival times. Felicie, 4 hours 15. Marcel, 6 hours flat, but missing letter. Each triumphant checkmark is followed by nervous footnotes about letters damp with canal water or sprinkled with inexplicable sawdust. Historians still argue whether these mishaps prove feline unreliability or simply highlight poor envelope craftsmanship. A quirky tidbit surfaces when you overhear a junior clerk recounting how one cat delivered its letter to the wrong house, triggering an impromptu tea invitation from a lonely widow who declared, "Any messenger so fluffy is welcome here." The widow allegedly wrote back thanking the post office for delightful four-legged companionship and requesting her groceries be sent the same way. Somewhere, Garraway would applaud the brand loyalty. René calls for a midday progress conference. He unfurls a map dotted with coloured pins, red for early finishers, blue for strays still roaming, black for ominous unknowns. A single black pin sits atop a district labelled Cité Ardente. Someone whispers rumours of a fish market there. You recall Bertrand's conflicted gaze. Joke 3 arrives on schedule. Leave a hungry cat in a fish district, and your correspondence might come back seasoned with dill. As afternoon shadows lengthen, you detour into a quiet alley where cobbles shine like dark licorice. A soot-grey kitten, clearly not on the official roster, strolls up, tail kinked in a question mark. You crouch, scratch behind its ears, and notice scraps of twine suggesting someone once tied a miniature mailbag. Perhaps deserters exist even in postal armies. You fish a crumb of waffle from your coat, field rations obviously, and bribe the deserter to act as scout. It trots ahead, winding through courtyards humming with laundry lines, leading you to a sun-bleached stone archway, where, surprise, Bertrand lounges atop a fish crate, licking scales from his whiskers. He eyes you, utterly. By sunset, 27 of the original 37 have reported home. René tallies results while chewing a licorice root to calm nerves. Fastest record, 4 hours exactly, set by a svelte black cat named Lisette. Slowest so far, still missing, last seen detouring into a brewery's malt cellar. If she returns with a slight wobble, no one will judge. A sudden hush falls over the crowd as a carriage rolls up bearing His Grace the Provincial Governor. He steps out, monocle gleaming, and asks dryly whether cats accept overtime pay in cream. Nervous laughter flutters. René assures him efficiency will improve. The governor scans the report, arching an eyebrow at the fish-soaked envelope evidence. "Innovative," he declares, "if somewhat fragrant." You imagine future governmental memos scented like haddock. Civil servants may never forgive this day. Night envelops Liège in golden lamplight. Cafes spill accordion tunes onto the street, and steam curls from iron grates. You stroll riverward, reflecting on lessons learned. Compared with London's rooftop fiasco, Belgian organisation feels disciplined. Yet the felines remain resolutely feline. Even with oilskin mailbags, they obey only appetites and whims. Still, you sense potential. Perhaps with refined training, smoked herring incentives say, cats could master urban delivery in ways pigeons or pony carts cannot. As you cross a footbridge, you look down at rippling reflections of lanterns and catch movement. A cat silhouette darting along the parapet, tiny satchel bouncing. Whether she reaches home tonight or detours through waffle heaven is anyone's guess. But the sight comforts you. It proves curiosity might carry the mail just far enough. And curiosity, unlike hope, has 9 lives. Back over the channel, you sail beneath a moon that flickers like a gas lamp caught between gusts. And by the time dawn rubs sleep from London's bricks, you are trudging toward the abandoned malt warehouse that Horatio Garraway has proudly rechristened the Feline Postal Training Academy. The sign, painted in thick tar, still smells like last night's lampblack, and a stray stroke drips in a way that makes the whole venture look permanently nervous. Inside, the air is part sawdust, part sardine smokehouse. Your stomach recognizes breakfast, even while your brain questions every career decision that has led you here. Garraway greets you, wearing a coachman's whistle, a tweed waistcoat, and the expression of a man who has finally captured lightning in a jam jar. "Splendid timing," he says, pressing a clipboard into your hands. "Today we begin structured conditioning." You glance down to discover a schedule divided into absurdly optimistic blocks. 6 a.m., rally call, 6:05, mindfulness grooming, 6:10, first herrings. If nothing else, punctuality will be tested more severely than the cats. The warehouse floor has been transformed into a miniature city, wooden rooftops connected by planks, drain pipes fashioned from stovepipe elbows, and scaled-down chimneys fashioned from flower pots. It looks like a toy maker's fever dream. You tap one of the planks. It wobbles ominously because authenticity apparently includes structural uncertainty. Along the starting line, 15 feline recruits lounge on plush cushions. Each wears a fresh collar, embroidered with a number, and the motto, Per catus expressus. Through the cat, delivered. Their pupils narrow at the sight of a burlap sack marked smoked herrings. Handle with awe. One orange tabby licks his lips so loudly you swear it echoes. Joke 1 settles in with the smoky aroma. Clearly the cats are motivated, just not by postage. Garraway produces a long wooden pointer, an absurd prop that nevertheless commands silence, and explains the methodology. The idea is to lure each cat along the rooftop maze by placing tiny flakes of smoked herring at strategic intervals, gradually increasing the gap between treats until, in theory, they learn to focus on the final destination rather than each morsel along the way. You nod, pretending you have not already spotted the flaw. Cats are much better at training humans to offer fish than at skipping snacks for efficiency. The whistle shrills. Assistants in canvas aprons scatter across the maze, sprinkling herring like priests scattering incense. The cats rise in a chorus of rustling whiskers. Number 3, a mink grey queen named Ethel, launches forward, tail high, paws silent. She clears the first gap, devours her treat, and blinks back a look of existential bliss. Number 7, a stout ginger christened Barnabas, decides existential bliss is overrated and simply breaks formation to follow his nose toward the central herring bucket. The entire back row joins him. Within 30 seconds, the operation resembles a seafood riot, and Garraway's pointer droops like a wilting dandelion. Mainstream fact interlude. By the late 19th century, Britain had over 2,500 officially licensed letter carriers, human, alas, in London alone, each expected to walk more than 16 miles per day. No wonder dreamers hunted for shortcuts with paws and wings. Garraway calls for Plan B, moving the herring incentive to the end platform only. Assistants sweep rogue flakes into tin dustpans while the cats look betrayed, an expression cats have perfected over thousands of years of pretending to be domesticated. You volunteer to reset the course, placing a single glistening fillet on a brass saucer beneath a small bell. The idea is Pavlovian, though no one here has yet read Pavlov. The whistle pierces again. This time Ethel advances with measured grace, ignoring the barren planks until she reaches the bell. She noses it chimes, and several cats stampede forward in panic, assuming the herring has exploded. Barnabas, meanwhile, tests the structural soundness of a flower pot chimney by rolling inside it for an impromptu nap. You scribble Barnabas, structural stress test specialist, on the clipboard and award him full points for comedic timing. Joke 2 accomplished. Historians still argue whether Garraway invented the bell and reward system in isolation or drew inspiration from continental pigeon fanciers who used whistles to summon their birds. The convergence of ideas around animal signalling in the 1870s borders on telepathy, or perhaps everyone shared the same nagging backache from hauling letters by hand. As morning stretches into noon, progress is, charitably, incremental. 3 cats now traverse half the course before succumbing to grooming breaks. One reaches the final platform, sniffs the mirror-polished saucer, and decides the reflection of her own whiskers is more interesting than fish. You watch her paw at the saucer, entranced by self-admiration, and wonder if vanity might be weaponized in future training. Quirky tidbit alert. A Victorian children's periodical once published step-by-step instructions for building a cat telegraph, which involved fastening messages to collars and luring the household cat between rooms with buttered toast. Reviews were mixed. Toast was consistently eaten before delivery. The article, however, fuels Garraway's brainstorming. Perhaps toasted breadcrumbs could mark the path between rooftops. You politely refrain from mentioning that feline crumbs typically disappear faster than Victorian fog. After a merciful tea break, strong Assam with a side of kippers, because apparent theme, you return to find Garraway unveiling miniature mailbags lined with velvet. Comfort is key, he insists, loading each with a stamped card addressed to an honorary recipient, to the Right Honourable Lord Mauser of Kensington Attic. Joke 3 lands as you imagine aristocratic mice trembling before a feline courier in velvet. Round 2 commences with unexpected discipline. Whether because the cats grow accustomed to the layout or because they sense tea time has ended, 4 navigate rooftops in near textbook fashion. They leap, pause, glance back for applause, and resume. At the final bell, Ethel again arrives first, plops her mailbag onto the saucer, and meows with a bass note that resonates through dusty rafters like a church organ's low chord. Garraway nearly weeps, declaring her the Florence Nighting cat of the postal service. You mark her name with a star so flamboyant it dents the paper. To cement the lesson, you and the assistants rearrange planks into sharper zigzags, widening gaps, raising the stakes, literally. Barnabas attempts one jump, misjudges, and ends up flailing mid-air before landing in a hay bale, positioned as a safety net. He emerges with straw stuck to his fur and an expression that claims it was all part of the plan. In debrief, Garraway coins the term adaptive route testing, which is a splendid way to describe cats doing whatever they want. By late afternoon, rain drums softly on the warehouse's tin roof. The cats, spent and fish-fatigued, sprawl across cushions like furry punctuation marks, occasionally twitching whiskers in dreams of unlimited sardines. Garraway drafts a glowing report to the General Post Office, emphasising breakthroughs in motivational architecture and downplaying the herrings that still decorate a few hidden corners like aquatic confetti. You help gather mailbags, brushing velvet smooth, and feel an odd, warm pride. If progress is measured in moments of grace amid chaos, today has been a landmark. Street lamps hiss awake as you step outside. The city smells of wet stone and rosin from violinists warming up in pubs. You tuck Ethel's performance card inside your coat, a souvenir of improbable hope. Somewhere out there, Belgian cats are still wandering fish markets. Somewhere ahead, rockets and pigeons await their moments. Darkness tiptoes across the rooftops, while lamplighters in bowler hats hiss kerosene into glass globes, turning the city into a chessboard of warm amber squares. Garraway calls this the Twilight Proving Run, though you suspect he mostly wants an excuse to wear his new waxed cotton greatcoat that squeaks like an indignant marmoset every time he moves, earned before the cats even clock in. Ethel, Barnabas, and 10 of their whiskered classmates line the lead gutter, tiny mailbags cinched, tails flicking like semaphore flags. Each pouch contains an honest-to-goodness letter stamped urgent, matchmaking invitations, overdue invoices, and one unsigned love note fragranced with lavender water that now has every Tom acting faintly lovesick. The signal is simple. You strike a pocket watch 3 times against a chimney pot. Clang, clang, clang. And the feline fleet springs forward. Ethel launches first, silhouette slicing the gaslit haze, followed by Barnabas, whose landing thumps loud enough to rattle loose tiles. You and Garraway jog along the alley below, heads tilted, tracking their progress by the scratch of claws and occasional clonk of dislodged slates. Somewhere behind, an apprentice drags a sack of emergency herrings, just in case morale requires edible bribery. Within minutes, the plan unravels in glorious Victorian fashion. A flock of sparrows bursts from a fig tree trained up an attic wall, and half the cats forget postal duty entirely. They streak after the birds, scattering feathers and faith in equal measure. Barnabas overshoots a landing, skids into a gutter overflowing from the earlier rain, and reclines, as though he's discovered London's first rooftop spa. You tick his name on the clipboard with a note, investigating hydrotherapy. Down at street level, you dodge lamplighters and a disgruntled night soil cart to reach the Spotted Stoat pub, the appointed endpoint for 3 cats carrying bar tabs and receipts. Only one arrives, Miss Tabitha, striped as a barley sugar twist, dropping her pouch squarely at the landlord's boots. Cheers erupt. Someone offers her a saucer of porter, which she sniffs and haughtily declines. Moments later, an orange blur streaks in, but it's Barnabas, soaked, shedding gutter water like a portable rain cloud. His mailbag drips ink, the love letter now dissolving into avant-garde poetry. The landlord reads the blur of violet smudge and shrugs. Still more romantic than half the fellows here? With a round of laughter and one resigned groan from a chap whose courting prospects just evaporated. Mainstream fact for credibility. Victorian pubs often served as unofficial postal drop points after normal sorting offices closed. The last collection bell rang at 8 p.m, so landlords earned pennies holding letters overnight for the morning run. Tonight, you watch that tradition collide with mewing chaos. Up on the ridge tiles, Ethel stays mission true. She leaps a 6-foot gap, tail windmilling for balance, then disappears behind a hostelry sign shaped like a brass badger. You sprint around the corner, nearly collide with a chimney sweep finishing late, and spot her in a dormer window, generously propped open by a curious 8-year-old. Ethel drops the invoice inside with regal aplomb and accepts a sardine reward produced from the boy's coat pocket. Apparently word spreads fast among London children about free cat shows. Historians still argue whether these rooftop trials influenced the post office's later decision to widen letter drops below street level, but the timing is suspiciously convenient. After tonight, no one wants loose envelopes wafting down like bureaucratic confetti. The lavender-scented love note, meanwhile, has been misdelivered to the Pig and Thistle, a rival pub 3 streets east. You learn this when a tipsy patron roars from an upstairs sash window, waving the damp missive at the moon and declaring undying affection for a mystery angel of Shoreditch. You and Garraway exchange glances. Damage control time. Scaling an iron fire escape that rattles with every step, you retrieve Barnabas, still sopping, and the offensively fragrant mailbag. Apologies are poured along with another round of porter, because diplomacy tastes better, foamy. Quirky tidbit drifts in with midnight fog. Some 19th century Londoners swore that cats could navigate rooftops better on cloudy nights, thanks to residual lantern soot coating their whiskers, providing extra sensory input. Pseudoscience? Absolutely. But tonight, watching Ethel tap her whiskers against chimney bricks like a surveyor with a walking stick, you half believe it. Back on task, you fan out toward Limehouse Basin, where 3 fishmongers have pooled shillings to test feline freight. Unfortunately, the route crosses the umbrella shop whose owner breeds carrier pigeons. The birds, offended by this ground-based competition, dive-bomb the cats. Ethel hisses, stands her ground, but 2 younger recruits bolt, mailbags dangling like threatening pendulums. One falls into a laundry cart, reforming Victorian petticoats into avant-garde art. The other slips into an open attic window and decides white lace is an acceptable runway. That will require apologies and starch tomorrow. By 2 in the morning, returns trickle in. You and Garraway tally results under a street lamp that sputters each time wind gusts. Out of 12 launched cats, 9 deliveries verified, 2 letters partially dissolved, 1 still outstanding. Considering the sparrow ambush and pigeon vendetta, Garraway calls the evening encouraging. He produces a rumpled notebook titled Lessons in Aerodynamic Treat Placement and adds tonight's findings, mainly keep aerial routes clear of rival fauna. You pen personal notes, success factors, Ethel's discipline, children's sardine stash, pubs appreciative of novelty. Hazards, gutters doubling as feline hot tubs, romantic ink susceptible to drizzle, competitive pigeons with attitude. Something about the list makes you smile. Maybe progress in any century is simply cataloguing fresh absurdities until the useful patterns remain. Sleepy silence cloaks the rooftops as the city fires die down. You escort the feline squad back to the warehouse dormitory, where straw-filled crates nestle against copper hot water pumps. Barnabas shakes himself dry, flops onto his cushion, and begins snoring with the steady rattle of a hand-cranked mimeograph. Ethel circles once, tucks her nose under a velvet mailbag, and dreams, you hope, of flawless leaps and applause that never end. Outside, bakery ovens exhale warm sourdough perfume, promising breakfast to anyone still awake. You linger at the door, watching the ink-blue horizon pale toward early dawn. Tonight you've witnessed chaos on rooftops, sparrow chases, gutter naps, parcels delivered to the wrong pubs, yet each mishap adds a brushstroke to a larger experiment. Perhaps the perfect courier won't have whiskers, but until electricity hums cables into every home, cats still hold tickets to the future in their paws. You pocket the salvaged lavender letter. Maybe tomorrow you'll find its rightful recipient. Or maybe you'll keep it as proof that even soggy affection can reach someone eventually. The next thing you know, the world is white noise and whiter landscape, snowflakes swirling like shredded telegrams, while 12 huskies surge in front of you, harness chains jingling a metallic lullaby that makes you forget rockets ever roared. You crouch on the runners of a sprucewood sled, fingers wrapped around a handlebar polished by frost and history, boots braced because brakes in this Arctic mail service are mostly wishful thinking. The musher, old Jack Icebeard McAllister, shouts hike, and the dogs explode forward, leaving a rooster tail of powder that tastes like frozen chalk. Somewhere in the sled's canvas hold, the lavender-scented letter slips against your scorched postcard and sighs, as if unsure why anybody thought perfume should endure -40 winds. The trail is a blue-scale ribbon snaking between spruce ghosts and granite crags. Icebeard hollers names, Blizzard, Comet, Fish Stealer, and every dog answers with a guttural rumble that sounds like a committee approving the agenda. Deliver 43 pounds of mail from Fort Yukon to the Circle Mining District before the aurora blots out the moon. When the lead dog, Fish Stealer, shoots you a side-eye that says he'll accept belly rubs only after receiving adequate salmon equity. You promise to draft a union contract once your pen thaws. Mainstream fact comes riding the cold. From the 1890s until small bush planes muscled in, the US Post Office paid mushers like Icebeard to run fixed dog teams across Alaska, some covering nearly 100 miles in a single coal-black night. Mailbags were wax-lined canvas, postage rates steady, and every musher carried a revolver more for wolves than robbers, because, as Icebeard chuckles, bandits are warmer in saloons, son. You lean into a turn that banks the sled so hard your hip kisses packed snow. Shards of ice prickle your ear, but the dogs hold the curve as smoothly as a pneumatic capsule negotiating Fleet Street junctions. Remember London's brass arteries? Imagine them stretched flat under starlight, pulled by pores instead of compressed air. The dog's breath crystallizes into plumes that trail like torch smoke, and the sled's runners sing a high whistle over glazed creek ice. For a moment, speed becomes silence, just the soft whoof of pause and the texture of starlight on snow. Then, the trail tilts up a wind-scoured ridge and everything loud returns. Icebeard hops off, jogging beside the sled to lighten the load. You attempt to copy him, discover that sprinting in snowshoes feels like wading through damp mattresses, and quickly revert to dignified passenger mode. Icebeard grins beneath his glacier-rimmed moustache and says, "City folk run like drunken penguins, best sit tight." You oblige, gripping the handlebar so hard frost fuses thumb to wood. A quick tug breaks the bond with an oddly satisfying pop. Quirky tidbit rattles loose when Icebeard explains his improvised dog booties. Sliced up flour sacks smeared with moose tallow to keep snow from balling between toes. He claims the dogs prefer the subtle aroma of bread dough and will pace faster if promised actual biscuits at the next roadhouse. Indeed, every time he shouts biscuit, the team surges as though powered by yeast. Dusk creeps in like ink spilled across parchment. Violet shadows pool in the sled's wake. The temperature drops again, a dry cold that crunches nostril hairs like brittle wires. You reach for your fountain pen to jot impressions, only to watch ink freeze mid-flow, forming a miniature sculpture, the shape of your own sentence. If correspondence froze in London, the cats would simply bat it like a toy. A flicker on the northern horizon, green curtains rippling, the aurora borealis unfurls, giant and hushed, smearing emerald feathers across a sky still bruised dark from twilight. Dogs glance up but press on. They've seen the sky doodle before. Historians still argue whether the famous 1903 Greenfire night spooked an entire mail relay into abandoning bags at Eagle River, yet Icebeard insists his grandfather kept going, because auroras don't pay postage. We crest a ridge and get our first look at Circle, 50 cabins dotting a frozen bend of the Yukon River, lantern light flickering like guarded secrets. Smoke from wood stoves rises straight, no wind a mercy. As we descend, you hear the miners' arguments even before the sled stops. Whose claim overlaps whose, how much gold dust weighs a cup of coffee, and whether Saturday actually exists when daylight lasts 3 hours. Tonight they'll add fresh fodder, a burlap sack of letters swaddled in oilskin and dog scent. Icebeard calls woe dogs plant paws, tails wagging slow victory banners. The postmaster, Ms. Hattie Two-Stamp Kincaid, strides out in a beaver fur parka, wielding an iron ledger. She counts bags by lantern light, initials each tag, and slides a peppermint into your mitten for chill shock. Cousin to Henrietta's Devon drops. You inspect the sled for stragglers. No loose postcards, though Fish Stealer eyes your pocket as if aware of lavender aromas. Inside the log post office, frost crystals fringe window panes like lace stolen from a pneumatic tube misadventure. Hattie sorts mail atop a pot-bellied stove, invoices, love notes, a requisition for blasting powder, and 3 tattered copies of Harper's Weekly. Your scorched postcard gets a stamp for onward travel to Nome, joining a stack bound by rawhide. The lavender letter she sets aside, sniffing faintly, raising an eyebrow. You mumble, long story, and earn a knowing grin. As dogs gnaw frozen salmon heads, you help stoke the stove and watch ink resurrect in warmth. Miners tramp in, cheeks raw, trading gold flakes for postage, currency melted, weighed and sprinkled like glitter over Hattie's scales. Calls of, "Any rockets tonight?" draw laughter. Word of Congreve couriers has travelled even here, where skyfire is common. You spin the tale of Ethel the Rocket, sparks painting the channel, and the crowd hoots until beards shake frost-free. Somewhere a fiddle strikes up a reel. Hefted mugs clink like small anvils. Later, bed is a bunk over the sorting table. You fall asleep amid comforting smells. Pine smoke, wet dog, envelope glue. Dreams braid cats leaping lamplit eaves, with pigeons threading cannon smoke, and rockets etching silver over black seas, then huskies galloping beneath aurora sheets, every pawprint spelling messages no ink could hold. Perhaps tomorrow brings steamships or Morse code, or whispering radio waves. Tonight the trail's rhythm lodges in your heartbeat, constant, devoted, undeterred by darkness. Salt-stung wind touses your hair as the side-wheeled packet steamer Celestine thumps eastward out of Plymouth Sound, boiler pistons thudding like an impatient heartbeat. You lean on the teak rail beside a red-painted keg emblazoned "Floating Mail, tougher than salt spray." Inside, bundles of letters, some still smelling faintly of lavender, others singed at the corners by rocket backfire, await their oceanic relay. The plan is delightfully eccentric. Heave these watertight canisters overboard, near remote headlands, where lighthouse keepers will fish them out with boat hooks, dry the envelopes by stove, and forward them inland. No need for cats, pigeons, or gunpowder, just tides and faith. Chief Postman, Silas Seacrate Morland, a walrus-moustached veteran of coastal mail runs, briefs you while knotting a tarred rope. "Tide's our engine now," he declares, "and if the gulls feel charitable, we get receipts." You arch a brow at that last bit. Morland explains that a natural history society on the Isle of Lundy once tried training great black-backed gulls to ferry acknowledgement slips back to the ship. When you imagine a bird stamping "delivered" with its beak, then invoicing you in herring. Steam whistles shriek. The deck crew hauls the first keg onto a tipping cradle. Morland scribbles today's date on a cork float, adds a cheery "mind the damp," and nods. With a creak and splash, the barrel drops, bobbing astern like a wooden cork in a cup of tea, quickly swallowed by rolling swells. You watch until it disappears behind a froth-topped ridge, hoping some keeper's lantern will soon gleam on its brass hoops. Mainstream fact surfaces with the swell. Beginning in the 1890s, British coastal packets really did practice seapost transfers, tossing sealed casks toward isolated lighthouses such as Eddystone or Skerryvore, where keepers retrieved, stamped and forwarded the mail. an aquatic cousin to the American railway postbag snatch. The Celestine settles into her rhythm. A horse puff every 6 seconds, paddle wheels slapping water into gull-tempting spray. Galley smells of briny stew waft up the companionway. Somewhere below, a donkey boiler hisses like London's pneumatic pipes, but with more attitude. Moreland invites you to the sorting salon, a cramped cabin where clerks brace knees against brass rails while cancelling stamps between lurches. Your lavender letter rides in a special oilskin wallet labelled hybrid, land, sea, who knows where. The scorched postcard gets an extra wax seal, just in case Neptune likes souvenirs. A whistle topside, second drop zone. Crewmen lug 2 smaller kegs to the bulwark and lash on canvas sails designed to catch prevailing current toward Bishop Rock Lighthouse. When the quartermaster complains the mini sails look like toddler bloomers flapping indecently in public, the kegs plop overboard. Bloomers billow. Everyone applauds the improvised fashion show. Late afternoon light turns pewter. On the outer deck you meet Dr. Hester Blythe, an ornithologist armed with leather gloves and sardine tins. She gestures skyward, where a dozen gulls wheel expectantly. "We're attempting a return receipt experiment," she explains, dangling a small cork-bound postcard coated in bait oil. The theory: gull grabs card, spies lighthouse lamp, and keeper's biscuit tin, drops payload onto the gallery, and receives crumbs in gratitude. You volunteer a sardine-fingered toss. A bold gull snatches the card mid-air, then circles suspiciously, as though remembering the infamous cat coalition back in London, and finally beats a path toward the distant granite tower. Success? Perhaps. Historians still argue whether any gull ever completed the route, or merely swapped postcards for crusts at seaside picnics. Evening fog creeps in, muffling the paddle clatter until the world feels padded, dreamlike. Lanterns swing from deck beams. Their glow paints halos on vapour, reminding you of Ethel the cat rocket's fiery arc. You share that tale with Dr. Blythe. She laughs so brightly the gulls squawk in reply. Quirky tidbit arrives on a silver tray at supper. The chief steward recounts how certain lighthouse keepers, annoyed by barrel deliveries that arrived during storms, installed miniature cannon to fire blank salutes at passing mail steamers, returned to sender with gusto. One keg reputedly ricocheted off a cliff and was later discovered by a seal colony chewed open, letters redistributed as nesting material. The steward swears he owns a stamp still bearing tiny tooth marks. Night deepens. The Celestine veers toward a calm cove off Start Point for her final dispatch. Moreland fits a pigeon-sized brass capsule to a hulking herring gull named Admiral Pexa Plenty. Graduate of Blythe's dubious training program, the bird flaps onto the rail, eyeing the capsule like an overdue library fine. With ceremonial gravitas, you recite a blessing involving fair winds and minimal digestive incidents. Admiral Pex bows, or maybe adjusts balance, and launches into the dark. When Moreland wagers a shilling, the gull delivers the cylinder, only if paid up front in chips. Past midnight, you lean against a lifeboat davit and feel vibration through planking. The relentless churn of steam and wave, machines and nature collaborating just enough to stay interesting. Somewhere astern, barrels drift toward lighthouse lanterns, letters knock politely inside, and maybe, just maybe, a sardine-scented postcard hurtles Gull Express back through the damp. A clerk joins you, puffing a pipe that smells of cedar and kelp. He calculates that today's floating mail may shave 2 days off land carriage around Cornwall. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. He reminds you that progress often looks like a wooden barrel, bobbing alone at night, carrying words no louder than candle scratches. You nod, recalling smoked herring trails for rooftop cats, and cyanide-fixed microfilm on pigeon tails. Different stages, same stubborn chorus. Let them know I'm thinking of them. The fog thins. Stars prick through. Paddle beats slow as boilers ease. The ship glides while engineers scoop ash. You pocket a cork float stamped FM 97, souvenir of the second drop, and tuck it with your growing relic collection: herring crumbs, pigeon feathers, rocket fin soot. Your satchel jingles history's odd toolkit, proof that even half-successful experiments earn bedtime tales. Below, bunks creak with dozing clerks. You settle into a canvas hammock strung between pigeon crates and coil of spare line, lulled by the hiss, thump, cadence. Thoughts drift to tomorrow's landfall, another sorting office, another improbable scheme awaiting your curiosity, rumours of wireless sparks leaping between coastal cliffs. But that can wait. For now, imagine lighthouse keepers lifting barrels from moonlit swells, steam rising off enamel teapots as they peel wax seals. Read letters aloud to gulls perched on railings. Somewhere in that chorus, your lavender letter sighs again, grateful for any road that points home, even one that floats. Steam whistles fade behind you as the train from Cornwall rattles into Paddington, and by dawn you are back where the entire escapade began, among London's chimney pots and restless pigeons, with your satchel now clinking like a curiosity cabinet. You climb the narrow stair to Garraway's office, ease open the door, and find the inventor asleep across his drafting table, beard tangled in blueprints of cat-eared rocket fins. You clear your throat. He startles upright, scattering ink blots that resemble miniature constellations. "Ah," he beams, "my ambassador of experimental postage returns." You unload the evidence. A smoked herring tin, flattened by feline sabotage, a pigeon tail feather, still laced with microfilm glue, a cork float from floating mail, smelling briny, a soot-dust rocket fin shaped like Ethel's ear. And, finally, the lavender-scented letter. Edges frayed, stamp browned by Arctic breath yet miraculously intact. Garraway inhales the aroma and sighs as if it were proof that optimism has a perfume all its own. Together, you pin a map to the wall and trace every route you have ridden: rooftop mazes, Belgian fish markets, brass pneumatic arteries, pigeon skyways, rocket parabolas, sled trails glowing with aurora, sea-mail barrels. The lines intersect like threads in a quilt. Where they cross, you thumbtack relics, each tack a heartbeat in the great circulatory system of human connection. You step back, tilt your head, and realize the plot looks uncannily like a sleeping cat curled around a globe. Garraway applauds your accidental cartographic pun. Mainstream fact settles into the conversation. By the early 20th century, the British Post Office had indeed woven an empire-wide lattice of rail, ship, dog team and, eventually, airplane routes capable of moving a postcard from London to Delhi in under 2 weeks. A marvel for an age still lighting streets with gas. Yet each polished cog traces back to prototypes you have witnessed: cats testing rooftop shortcuts, pigeons daring bullets, rockets flirting with Neptune. Morning light warms the frosted panes. Garraway fetches 2 dented tin mugs of tea so strong the spoon stands upright. "Postal porter," he jokes. You clink mugs, then leaf through the ledger of prior night's data. Some entries read like punchlines: barrel intercepted by seal, others like poetry, pigeon silver hyphen in moonlight. Historians still argue whether such fringe trials truly nudged mainstream logistics forward or merely provided Victorian newspapers with comic relief. But you suspect influence often hides in laughter before it marches into policy. You post the lavender letter at last, sliding it into a gleaming wall box newly installed beside Garraway's door. The brass flap snaps shut with a tidy click that feels ceremonial. Where it will travel you cannot say, but its journey already spans more legends than most stamps see in a lifetime. Outside, you stroll past St. Martin's Le Grand headquarters, watching uniformed carriers sort bundles onto horse-drawn carts. No feline patrols those rooftops now, but a sleek telegraph wire hums overhead, its faint buzz, like a pigeon's heartbeat, encoded in copper. In 6 months, engineers whisper, Marconi's wireless will crackle across the channel. Within a decade, the first airmail biplanes will sputter out of Hendon. Joke 2 arrives when you imagine Garraway fitting velvet mailbags onto propellers. For brand continuity. At Ludgate Circus, you duck into a tobacconist's shop where a display trumpets rocket post, toffee tins painted with star-streaked envelopes. You grin at the marketing echo, proof that even partial success can kindle popular myth. The shopkeeper admits he has never seen an actual rocket deliver a bill, but the tins sell faster than peppermint drops. Quirky tidbit confirmed. Victorian souvenir culture monetizes anything that sounds slightly explosive. You wander toward the river. Barges unload crates bearing stenciled gull logos. Dr. Blythe's return receipt program has evidently found a sponsor. Dockhands take wagers on whether gulls or barrels will prove steadier couriers. Odds favour whichever keeps the fish. Joke 3 rides a gull's shriek overhead, punctuating the bet. Crossing Blackfriars Bridge, you spot a familiar ginger tail atop the parapet. Barnabas, velvet bag slung pridefully, now serving as honorary mascot for a children's postal club. He recognises you, perhaps by herring scent, and butts your knee. A girl in a sailor dress explains they run kittengrams along the embankment, delivering comic sketches between street performers. Innovation, it appears, scales from empires down to pocket money. By twilight, you return to the Warehouse Academy, now repurposed into a museum of odd deliveries. Visitors wander past cages of retired pigeons, stroke padded rocket fins, and peek into a working pneumatic demo that woos letters through transparent tubes with a whoosh like a lullaby. Garraway leads nightly tours, his squeaky greatcoat now a badge of honour rather than a fashion oddity. He invites you to give the closing talk. You clear your throat, inhale the dusty sweet air, and tell the small crowd that connection is humanity's second heartbeat. Quiet, insistent, occasionally ridiculous, yet always finding a way. Before bed, you climb the roof one last time. The Thames glimmers under steel blue sky. Somewhere in this great sprawl, a sorting clerk stamps the lavender letter's passport. Somewhere farther, a husky team skims frost, a rocket tube rusts. So now, dear traveller, let the night settle. Picture the rooftops emptying of all bustle. The last cat curling into a comma atop a warm chimney pot, purring the city towards softness. Imagine distant pigeons folding wings as lamps gutter low, their little cargoes already tucked into waiting hands far below. Feel the heavy hush of the underground tubes easing their breath, valves loosening, brass skins cooling under quiet brick arches. Far away, sled dogs have finished their trot. They sleep in crescents, paws twitching through dreams of aurora that dance like slow green curtains across their closed eyes. Even out on the salt dark, barrels bob gently. Each swell a cradle rocking paper voices toward lighthouse keepers, who themselves nod beside glowing stoves. Everything that needed to move has moved. Everything that needed to be said now drifts patiently toward understanding. Allow that rhythm to seep into your own bones, the measured pulse of paw, wing, wheel and wave, repeating somewhere just beyond your hearing. Thoughts flatten like calm water. Words stretch into longer, lazier shapes. And sentences meander the way a river widens before meeting the sea. With every breath, feel the weight of blankets anchor you, the way ballast steadies a balloon, safe and sure even as dreams begin to lift. There is no schedule here, no urgent stamp to punch, only the slow assurance that messages will arrive in their own good hour, borne by the quiet devotion of wind, fur, feather, and tide. Let eyelids swing closed like the final postbox hatch, sealing away the day. Somewhere in that comfortable darkness, may a gentle whisper reach you. All is delivered. All is well.